frothy with like a lot of opportunity if you have a bunch of cash, which people do. Don't get me wrong, but like spec purchasing of just like buying a vacant warehouse is fucking nuts right now. Welcome to the Dirt Podcasts. I'm Miles Solomon. Every week I share my perspective on commercial real estate and the business of trading dirt. Let's get into it.
Nothing in this podcast is legal, tax, or investment advice. It's for entertainment only, loosely inspired by real estate, and any resemblance to actual people, deals, or outcomes is accidental or aggressively fictionalized. Talk to your attorney, CPA, and advisors before acting on anything you hear.
Okay, this episode's a little different than the last one. This episode's about never letting your money sleep. And this is something that someone told me a while back that either they told me or I read, but in any case, it got ingrained in my brain, and here we are. So when you're sleeping or doing anything, your money should be working for you. You still need to have money to cover expenses and things, but aside from that, it needs to be working. So I don't want to give any general money advice to everybody out there, because the truth of the matter is it's truly different for every single person. And that depends on your age, how much money you make, who depends on you, your risk profile, etc. So the individual decisions you're going to make are really going to depend on the particulars of your life. So that's not just a standard disclaimer that this is not financial or legal advice, but I'm just saying, it is a very personal decision. And most of these podcasts giving business advice, I think, are bullshit, because, if you're buying gold and index funds and you're 20 years old and you have $3,000, it's a lot different than if you're 30 or if you're 50. And it depends on, who you're supporting, what you got going on, all of that. But so, while I think it's worth pointing that out, that I'm also sitting on a good chunk of cash right now. And that's partially because I've been saving my war chest, as they call it, for a good opportunity and for some legal battles I'm in. But I think I've also been telling myself it's because I've been busy making money and I haven't found the right deal. And it's hard to find a deal right now. And, you don't know what's going to happen next year and blah, blah, blah. And, when I was thinking about that, I found that excuses, even when there's like 10 separate excuses, they have a way of just like forming in your head as one long reasonable excuse. So it isn't until like I say it out loud, like that I realize how dumb these reasons are. And I think that applies to a lot of things, but especially when it comes to like investing and putting your money to work. You might have all these reasons why you can't or you shouldn't. And it's really easy to convince yourself that like you have one good formulated reason for why. But a lot of times, I don't know, like, let's keep it real. I'm sitting on cash because I've been lazy, because I've been, a little risk averse or scared. And it's because it's a lot of hard work to find a great deal. And when you find one, it's usually a lot more hard work after that. So even the hard work of finding the deal or finding the investment, and, I'm talking about real estate primarily, but it could be if you go through stocks or you do, your research online about different things, it could be all of that. But it's a lot of hard work in finding, sorting, and valuing. And then once you get it, especially in real estate, usually those opportunities, you have to go in there and you have to take risks, you have to do things, you have to fix it up, you have to do X, Y, Z. And I made a commitment when I got into this business that when I got established, I would buy a deal every year. And I've done that, but every single year it's been down to the wire just about every time. And this year is no different. I want to give a shout out actually to my buddy Nico, the solar boy from Shady, Brooklyn. He's been an absolute pain in the ass the last couple months, but he has been relentlessly hounding me about us finding a deal. And I appreciate that because, I need to, I need to have my money working. This year, I think it's multifamily for me. In past years, I put money into some industrial deals, a couple master leases where, I master lease it from an owner, and then, I'm subleasing it to different tenants. I own some single family stuff. But this year it's multifamily for me. Industrial is just too fucked up. It really is. The market is still completely inverted in terms of sale pricing and lease rates. And what I mean by that is like sale prices have been dropping consistently, and there are deals to be had, but like it's tough. First, because the lease rates are just plummeting. Vacancy is piling up as shit tons of warehouses and yards come on the market with like no or very little demand for any of it. And I'm not like even that confident about what the vacancy numbers in central LA like really are. I've been sus about all the numbers coming out, including our own numbers. Sorry, Jack, if you're listening to this, because the amount of properties with tenants in substantial breach or arrears is like huge. I know that, I don't know what percentage, if I had to put a percentage on it, but like a good percentage of my own clients, you know, the tenant is behind on rent months and months, or we're doing a workout deal where they're paying abated rent, or, you know, there is a substantial portion of basically distress that's not being accounted for in the vacancy. So that's tens of millions of square feet in LA County that are in some level of tenant distress, I would say. And so if like our official rate is like, call it 10%, I don't know if it's that much, it might be 8. It's like, I think it's really probably far more than that. So that's the first thing. Inverse lease and sale prices, if that's what you can call it. But yeah, just like an overall shitty market. It's frothy with like a lot of opportunity if you have a bunch of cash, which people do. Don't get me wrong, but like spec purchasing of just like buying a vacant warehouse is fucking nuts right now. Like you could be sitting on a vacant warehouse for 6 to 12 months while you chase this market down. And like I have some cash, but when I say like I'm building my war chest, it's not like that kind of cash. The wrong deal would wipe me off the face of the earth really fucking quick. And so then to the second point, like lending on industrial is very difficult. So aside from the market conditions, the financing world is really difficult, and it's a huge pain in the ass. It was tough before. I wasn't around during 08, but I do think that lenders, even during easy money, low interest rate, I do think they tightened a lot their standards and regulations for, you know, policies of how they were lending money. Or maybe, you know, tough is not the word, but like, you know, because how tough is it if loans are at like 3% or 4%, but like thorough. And now it's like extra thorough. They want these buildings occupied. They want them cash flowing well. You need to be putting down like 35%. And they're looking at all the partners on the deal. And, you know, let's just say for like the sake of argument, we're talking about like $1 million in cash. In LA, that's not that much. $1 million in cash at like 35% down gets you like call it like a $2.8 million deal. You know what, like a $2.8 million deal in LA gets you? It gets you like a fucking metal warehouse in Compton. Not that there's anything wrong with Compton, but I mean, there is. Like, that's not the point, but there is. Compton has one of the worst zoning departments in California. So, which basically means the worst zoning department in the world. Like, Curran Price should be in fucking jail, and he's still the mayor of Compton. I'm not going to go political, but do your own fucking research on what that means. But like from a zoning perspective, I mean, an industrial building in Compton is like fairly problematic. And you can't do shit with that. So even if you take it out of Compton and say, you know, because I'm a smart boy and I can find deals, like say that you go to somewhere else, you get a 14,000 foot metal building and like right next door. There's properties in Compton that have a Compton mailing address, but there's technically West Rancho Dominguez, which is unincorporated LA County. That's as close to Texas as you can get from LA, is what I like to say about LA County unincorporated. That used to be the case. Now, like all things, they've absolutely fucked that too, with these green zone, which I'll talk about in another episode because that's a whole other story. But let's just say, you know, it's fine for 14,000 feet. Let's say it's got all the bells and whistles. It's in West Rancho Dominguez, LA County. It's got cranes, like a couple of them. It's got heavy power. It's got like 480 volts at 800 amps. That, you know, the works, and it's got a nice yard. Well, like that metal building, like realistically, conservatively, like should rent for like 60 cents a foot net. 60 cents a foot net is what it should rent for right now. And you know, you're going to have to argue with the appraiser and with the lender if it's more than that. But again, I'm a smart boy, so let's just say that I've got a tenant and they're going to pay $1 a foot net. So let's say $1 a foot net per month. Net meaning the tenant pays property tax and insurance, which are going to be fairly significant. But let's just say in this made up fucking scenario that $1 a foot per month per year is like $12 a year. So you do $12 a foot in rent into what you're buying the building for, which is, call that $200 a foot. So that's a 6 cap. Now that's assuming you have the tenant. That's assuming that the building doesn't need a bunch of TIs, that yada, yada. Well, I got to get that deal through underwriting. I need to bring the tenant in and have them sign some kind of lease that is contingent upon me closing this deal, which we've done before, but like, you know, especially now, that's complicated when every day you have a new building or every week you have a new potential competition coming out. But let's just say he's specialized and this is the perfect building and blah, blah, blah. So now the lender wants to see, you know, that lease. They want to see my financials, but they also want to see the tenant's financials and my partner's. And pretty soon it's just all this goddamn work. And I can get an investment loan if I get through all that in maybe like the mid 6s and like doing payable in 5 years or something, or like floating rate after 3 years, you know, some fucked up trip. Like, go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. So, you know, like I said, I own some single family. And now I'm really trying to learn about a thing that I don't know that much about, which is multifamily. I'm being educated by the salesman, which is not a position I like to be in. I like to do a lot of research about everything that I'm talking about, that I'm investing, that I'm doing. I guess part of it is, you know, I don't know if I like to be the smartest person in the room, because I truly don't believe I am, but I like to be the most, or one of the most well-informed person in the room on whatever the thing is that we're talking about. And I've always been that way. And I think, you know, if you're not, I've got friends that are just raw brain power working at like a way higher level. They don't need to overcompensate like that. But for me, it works. And so that's what I do. So, you know, I don't like being educated by the salesman, but that's where we're at, because I'm trying to buy a deal. And, you know, so I've called, I would say 100, literally 100 residential agents. And that's like proper residential that have like a one-off deal or maybe a couple. And then, you know, also spoken to some commercial real estate guys that are, you know, only doing multifamily. And yeah, I mean, if you're new to this business, you might be thinking, well, aren't you a commercial real estate broker? Like, how do you not know this? And how do you not know about multifamily? That's like commercial, isn't it? Well, good question. Fair. I'm remarkably ignorant about commercial real estate, if I'm being honest. And by the way, I believe, you know, most, if not all, great brokers, not to say I'm a great broker, but I believe most are pretty ignorant about other branches of commercial real estate. Like the fact that we don't have 2 licenses in this state. I mean, we should have like 20 different licenses, but certainly residential and commercial should be different licenses. But that's another story. So believe me when I say I truly am really only an expert in my specific niche, which tends to be like hardcore industrial, mainly land. And that's only like in specific, call it 10 square mile, if that region. So in Los Angeles, central Los Angeles. So even like the outer bounds of LA County, I don't go unless there's a very special fucking occasion. And if it's not something that I know well, I definitely bring on someone local, not because I have to from a company perspective, because I don't. You know, the great part about Lee and Associates is we don't have to do that. We can go and work in whatever market, you know, our license works in. But partially it's out of respect, but also because of expertise, and I want to bring the best guy in. And again, I'll mention Jack Klein a lot in this podcast because he was my boss and my mentor for a long time, and now he's my partner. But that was something that he, was very adamant about, that you want to be, Jack loves the phrase, the guy. Like, you want to be the guy or the gal. He's never said that, but I'm the next generation. So you want to be the gal for whatever the niche is that you're in. And the only way you get that way is, by really focusing and really sticking to like your core competency. So I want to thank or blame Jack for that. That was one of the many things that he was pounding into my brain, that you need to own and control your little thing and be very fucking careful when you wander out of your corner of the sandbox. And I think it's important to learn from other people. Like, that's the point of basically human existence, is to learn from others so that you don't have to make the same mistake. And Jack was a great teacher, is a great teacher. And he's made, that point, I think from personal experience, where he's gotten absolutely smoked by going out of his, and I'm not talking about just brokerage, but going out of his core competency. So I've taken that to heart, and I live that philosophy. And I think that hyper specialization is where the world is going when you have so much general and like collective knowledge, especially now with AI. Like, at least for now, like, I'm constantly querying AI. I use it all the time. But I'm asking it the details on things and the specifics and the minutia. And that is where, like, I think AI really falls apart for me. It can recall really specific, nuanced info. Like, don't get me wrong about that. I'm not claiming that it has a fucking better memory than me. It's a computer, after all. And it's doing just like tiny calculation after calculation, putting words together through context and networks and whatever other nerd shit I'm not smart enough to understand. And it's great. But where I've realized it falls extremely short, and it does like the same for the non-computer competitions I'm talking about, like other brokers, is like a specific framework of knowledge that is really grounded in details. I think Charlie Munger talks about like this lattice of a framework for how you think about different things. He believes you should have a belief that you should have like 100, I think, different frameworks for how to think about the details and the minutia of each thing. And I don't know, I don't find that ChatGPT or any of the others, Claude or whatever, have like a really specific framework of knowledge grounded in details. If you prompt it exactly right, it can get a lot of really great info. But it has trouble, I mean, thank God for our jobs for now, it has trouble putting that together in like a coherent framework that makes sense. Especially if you can't prompt it. Like, if you can't prompt it, you're in trouble. But like, even so, key details are just not there a lot of times. And it gives like this is probably the scariest part, or I mean, I don't think it's scary, but like the highest opportunity or the biggest opportunity, or, thank God, or whatever you want to say, that it can give this illusion of knowledge without really knowing what it's talking about. Like, it's not artificial intelligence. Like, that's great branding, but I'm not an anti-AI guy, but my point is, the framework that it comes across on a lot of these things is iffy, and the logical conclusions it makes sometimes are not logical. It can come to conclusions without like really knowing the details. And if you're not a subject matter expert, like, you're fucked, because you won't know. I'll have it sometimes cite links and references for every single thing it says, and still, like, either it takes it out of context on occasion, or it comes up with like bullshit conclusions. When you're talking about like very specific things, when it comes to real estate, for example, the devil is in the details. And so, this isn't a discourse on AI. I'm not doubting its importance. I genuinely believe we will have a reckoning, and probably, like, I mean, not to go too conspiratorial, but like, I think we will have something of like a full-scale war with clinkers, that's robots and AI. But for the time being, I'm just saying being extremely specialized has served me well so far. And so that being said, like I could be like the last horse buggy maker, making these fucking carts for horses before the car debuts. And like, what am I going to do after? I think this is a problem for myself and probably a lot of other brokers. Like I'm incredibly not diversified. And, my career income, through brokerage comes from real estate. My investments and the money I make outside of brokerage comes from real estate. And also like my core competency and knowledge, if you want to consider that like similar to your investments, similar to your real estate, like all of that is in real estate, and all of that's under the umbrella of like these absolute fucknuts here in California and in LA. So yeah, I'd like to diversify. But even in this conversation, we're talking about multifamily, like within an hour of where I live, like it's not that diversified. But that's the challenge, I think, with being an expert on something and not wanting to step out of that zone. And so, by the way, it's not a fucking comfort zone either. Like, let's be fucking clear that the level of risk and exposure that you have when you're so committed to one thing is not comfortable. Like, I'm well aware of that. I think every day there's like this tightening of like a noose through laws at the federal, state, local level. And even just like the person at the counter checking plans who are making it difficult for new businesses to come here when they can go to so many other places. Like, it's not comfortable. I think all of that has an effect on your risk exposure, my risk exposure. And it just, whatever, it is what it is ultimately. And I think a lot of people, especially in this career path, find themselves in the same situation. Or otherwise they just go like the opposite and they don't really own shit and they just put all their money in an index fund and they've got, maybe a few $1 million in the stock market and they make their brokerage business and that's it. They call it a day. And that seems smart, and it probably is smart, but it does not seem like a compelling, like a good path to great fortune to me. But look, it pains me to say it, but genuinely, I think if I lost everything tomorrow, I'm confident that with all this privilege and knowledge, like I could probably do it all over again. I think many people have had a lot more than me, lost a lot more than me, and remade even more than that. So that's just the risk I think you have to be willing to take when you don't diversify and when you're really focused on something. So back to multifamily. So there are some things to really love. First of all, from a depreciation standpoint, especially now that bonus is back. Thank you, Mr. Trump, President Trump. It's one of the things you've done that actually really agree with. So that depreciation, especially the bonus depreciation that's back, can be really significant on multifamily. So I don't think a 60% cost segregation is crazy. And a cost segregation, if you don't know, and we could talk about it on another podcast, or another episode, is basically the IRS has a schedule for how every component of a building or a property is broken down and depreciated. So they'll say, like, for example, I don't remember, I think it's 27 and a half years for a lot of general property, and it's 5 years for carpet and 7 years for AC. They have the schedule that's kind of, to some extent it's arbitrary, but I'm sure they have their reasoning. And what bonus depreciation and cost segregation have allowed them to do is you take all those different components, bring them basically on an accelerated schedule. And so in the first year of owning a property, you might have 60% depreciation, where you've taken 28 or 30 years of depreciation, you've accelerated it all into the first year. So what that means is, like, for a $2 million property, if you bought a $2 million multifamily home or a multifamily building, 10 units, that's 10 dishwashers, that's 10 sets of carpets, that's 10 toilets, that's 10 AC handlers, whatever it is. So you might get 60% call it depreciation. That's $1.2 million in depreciation. So if you're a real estate professional, I'm talking like a bona fide IRS, like categorized real estate professional, which I think is like 700 hours a year or 750 or something. But in any case, if you're a real estate professional, that's depreciation you can directly put against your income. And that means you can make $1.2 million, and that's $1.2 million in depreciation off your tax returns. So, I mean, it's fucking crazy. And like, unlike expensing and deductions and all that, depreciation is an add back. So it doesn't count against you from an underwriting standpoint on lending. That is, I mean, that's incredible. It is an incredible tool. And by the way, first of all, I don't think anyone listening is too far off from having an interest in. I don't think the general listener gives a shit about any of this or would be listening still if, you know, they weren't interested in real estate. But this isn't a fucking scam. It's not a hack. It's not like some billboard fucking tax loop that you get involved in and then 5 years later you're standing in front of Congress like dealing with this. Like, it's not that. This is the U.S. government wanting to incentivize investment in U.S. property and U.S. real estate. And it's great for, you know, the reason the IRS incentivizes activities that it wants because it sees bigger, better incentives or activity because of that. So it's great for property values. It's great for real estate activity. It's great for the economy. It's great for property taxes. And so they're willing to incentivize that by providing, you know, this kind of depreciation. I think it was a great, obviously I'm biased, but I think it was a great decision from Trump because, you know, that kind of activity is what stimulates this economy. And so depreciation is one on that multifamily thing. And multifamily also experiences like really good rent growth if it's in a good location. That rent is growing with like the quality of the economic success of your tenants. So that means like if the existing tenants are growing in wealth due to better paying jobs or, you know, whatever, or because the area is like changing, it's gentrifying, you're getting better tenants and you're getting at least higher, maybe not better, but higher, you know, fuck it. Yeah, you're getting better tenants and you're getting higher paying tenants. And that's year over year rent growth that you don't get in industrial as reliably and as greatly, except for like the last period of crazy COVID rent growth. So the last thing, and I'm gonna wrap this up, is leverage in multifamily is insane when you're comparing it to industrial. There's so much competition for lending that the loan environment is super dynamic and healthy. They have like every type of product that any douchebag on Wall Street could think of. They have every type of structure available to borrowers, and banks are generally also just like much more comfortable owning that kind of asset and reselling it because they understand it, and it's generally lower risk with more tenants and tenant income and more diversification. Whereas for industrial, if a warehouse goes vacant, God forbid the bank has to take it back. And they're so absolutely fucked a lot of time on, you know, depending on what kind of asset it is, but it can be really challenging because a lot of these are user buildings or whatever it is. So you don't have that as much issues like that with multifamily, at least not in good areas. So yeah, I'm getting some major lessons on multifamily as far as, you know, the specifics of the market, the location, you know, things that I'm trying to figure out, before I buy it. And the goal is to learn enough about, you know, what I'm getting into, hopefully to not get smoked after I buy something. But I want to keep the money working, not letting it sleep, you know, mailbox fucking money, dog. That's not buying a deal. So if that's not buying a deal and earning rent, then it might just be investing in treasury bills or indexes or Bitcoins, if that's your thing. Or for me, multifamily. I do not want to be a broker for the rest of my life. I don't want to be fucking Willie Loman, cold calling for my Suriname soup at 70 years old. I love this business, but if I'm cold calling at 70, it better be a fucking choice. And I'm pursuing multifamily to see, what that looks like.